Okay, I'm recording now. So I would like to suggest that we make some brief introductions. So my name is Roland Legrand, and I live in Antwerp, Belgium. I'm a journalist, and I'm a Howard Rheingold alumnus. And organizing some reading groups. We read various books, and this latest one is the Peeragogy Handbook. And I'm interested in all things peer-to-peer learning. And that's about it. Melanie, that you could make it. So maybe a brief introduction.
Did you want me to start? Sorry.
Yes, if you
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm Melanie. I'm from Sacramento. I've been kind of out of tune the last month or two on what's been going on with Peeragogy, but was a part of the collective, I guess collective intelligence was the name of the class that we were working on. And my interest is in food. It's in systems, ecology, and archiving ideas, both in groups and independently, and how that merges together. I think that's good enough.
Can I jump in and make two suggestions, which is that, so I'm Joe.
We don't hear actually.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah. So maybe you, Charles, you can continue the introduction.
Okay, I'm sitting in Zurich, Switzerland. Just came from a meetup about DAOs. So I'm sort of full of a lot of things, and I am ostensibly going to present, but I would prefer more just to moderate or kind of invite any of your voices in. And I do have some notes and thoughts as to kind of how we came to this point in the discussion, in the overall conversation of peeragogy, and kind of bringing DAOs into peeragogy, maybe possibly bringing peeragogy into DAOs, and very involved, especially with Lauren, who's here, and a few others in collaboration with intelligence, and increasingly with DAOs as well.
Great, thank you. Lawrence.
My name is Lorenz. I'm in the New York area. I've been very interested in technology that can support online co-creation and communication at deep levels of awareness, and actually been building software around this theme for the last 4 or 5 years called Sutra, which is basically an ongoing experiment into collaborative learning, generative knowledge building, and community building in an online context. So I'm really interested to learn both about peeragogy and about DAOs and the integration of that territory. So super happy to be here and meet all of you.
Thank you so much. Lauren.
Hey, I'm super happy to be here tonight. So my name is Lauren Nignon, and I'm American, but I'm here in France, and I'm interested in collective intelligence, and Charles and I are starting up a collective intelligence collaboratory. So we hope that Peeragogy can be part of it. And the idea is to try to get people to collaborate kind of across organizations and across conversations without, from the top, just kind of flocking together like birds. So that's it.
Thank you. Day Tripper Diva.
Okay, I've got to change my name. Charlotte Pierce, and I am the publisher of record for the Peeragogy Handbook, a contributor since 2012, and I do podcasting and book publishing in the Boston area. So I've been out at a rowing convention the last few days and preparing for that. So I apologize for being AWOL.
That's great. Joe?
Sorry, did you guys hear me making an impromptu recommendation as my self-introduction that we not use the word "and" so that people are very brief? That was my introduction. But I also wanted to say something else. I can't remember what that was anymore. So anyway, that's it, really. Yes, be brief so we can get on. But it's really nice to see everyone here. Okay, bye.
Okay.
And Joe is one of the ringleaders and spearheaders of this whole thing, right?
Yeah. Joe and Charlotte, actually. Gary? I see this.
Yes, I gave a stab at an
Yeah.
introduction earlier, but I'm Gary Coulter from Fort Worth, Texas. I'm out in my garage now. Sorry for all the clutter. I'm very interested in DAOs and peeragogy and collaborative learning. I'm a retired educator with some training in math and computer science, and I'm working on the Art on the Blockchain project with ArtChain right now, which we hope to implement open money, open credit, those sorts of things as a pilot project, possibly.
Thanks a lot. Michael?
I'm Michael Linton, Vancouver Island, west coast of Canada. My particular obsession is community money, networks, cooperative money, that stuff, open money. The DAO, man, it confuses me. I want to know what the DAO is. Show me the DAO, please. DAO now.
Yes.
Michael, you're not. It's not going to be any better when you see the DAO.
It's not just one. I mean, there was one kind of big famous one that had some problems and made some noise and bad reputation area, but now it's another scene.
The DAO that is now is not the DAO that is.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Ivan?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, my name's Ivan. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm here at the behest of Charles. Worked with him, or at least spoken to him and Lauren quite a bit through a few different DAO ideas. My background is in industrial organizational psychology and social psychology, and data geek, a crypto enthusiast, autodidact, and interested in trustless systems and different types of governance. And DAOs in general now, because I see that they may be a way that we can deal with the persnickety human nature, greed, and so forth. Pedagogy is, or peeragogy rather, is a new idea to me that Charles introduced me in, so I thought I'd sit in and see what you guys are up to.
And then there is Stefan. I don't know whether he can hear me. I do know he has some issues using Zoom. So if there is any way he can tell us something, that would be welcome. So I use the text chat to join him.
I would give a shout out to Stefan and everyone who's sort of participating in the forum on the Google group. But I think in particular, Stefan has done some really wonderful work contributing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I'm thank you for being here. Charles, if you want to be the moderator, I think that's an excellent idea. You do know people and the subject matter, so please go ahead. Oh, but you have to unmute yourself.
Indeed, thank you. I'm fishing for the notes that I prepared, but I mean, some of you heard kind of the short story of how this came to me. The idea of kind of combining, mashing up, if you will, peeragogy, peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer production, and DAOs. I think I have a sort of a deep intuitive sense that they're extremely well suited, maybe match made in heaven or something for each other. And I haven't been able to sort of devote myself, or even if I had the ability to connect the dots. So it is a definitely collective effort to kind of to whoever's into it, you know, to kind of reach for those gaps and articulate and fill them in. So the notion of engagement in communities, in particular in virtual communities, coming out of book discussion conversation that I didn't get to really participate in, but I caught little pieces of, which was Howard Rheingold's book, The Virtual Community. And considering, and having been through a couple of Howard's classes myself, and certainly lots of online spaces, Facebook groups, and all kinds of others, considering scaling, you know, let's say global community in service of you know, helping the planet deal with climate change or other kind of existential risks. So these are kind of my broad motivations, and then it just came to me, you know, there's sort of this similar, or maybe the same kind of challenge, broad challenge in peeragogy, in any kind of learning environment, but in particular collaborative learning, which is you know, actual co-learning, you know, sort of getting people not just to getting them to show up, but then to actually sort of do various collaborative tasks and take on roles, and you know, most, if not all, of the fundamental ones are quite well defined in the Peeragogy handbook and in the course of you know, Howard Rheingold's classes and so forth, note taking and mapping and wikis and link extraction and things like that. But then more broadly, not just in the sort of you know, live meeting space, but beyond, you know, how does peer collaboration, peer learning, and peer production, you know, actually happen? And then, so first of all, you know, there has to be engagement. People have to show up and actually sort of do it. And then back on the virtual community side, you know, sort of just getting conversations going, or whatever the motivations, objectives are of any given community or interest group. Then, you know, and then also in event production, or like concert promotion, for example, I have experience there where, you know, no matter how hard you try and how amazing is the gig, then, you know, people at the last minute can't show up. There's things that come up or whatever. So back on peeragogy, you know, the sort of the dream is to co-design, to create a system, ecosystem where there's incentive for showing up and for doing these different tasks and roles, and actually, you know, actually co-learning and co-producing, if that, and to the extent that's also the goal, to kind of have some products, for example. And yeah, I'm kind of winging it. I could fish for my notes, and I'll come back to sort of, you know, a kind of outline that I sketched, but essentially, ascribing value to these types of tasks and roles somehow, at least as a starting point, and then I see it as a kind of a wheel that needs to turn, and I think that the wheel can turn. And I, you know, I'm not a mathematician or a tech guy or a game designer, but I think these things will for sure all come to bear, and maybe that's enough for the moment. I hope that made sense. Anyone can sort of pick it up from there. I mean, I would point to Ivan or Lauren in particular, because I've been in a lot of discussion with you both in and around DAOs, and maybe just sort of lob it to you guys in particular. You know, where do you see the kind of starting point for this conversation? Where's the nexus, sort of fundamentally or potentially for Peeragogy DAO? Or anyone else?
Ivan?
Yes. I don't think at this minute I have anything to say. I think I need to listen a little longer, and I'm certain to have more soon. It's a very new concept to me, aka yesterday.
Well, I can just explain a little bit about my impressions of DAO so far. So I'm not sure if if you're searching for the Shangri-La of amazing human relations, you're gonna find it in a DAO. But I do think there's a certain element of it that's absolutely addicting and fascinating, and what happens in there, and the hijinks and the proposals, it's super interesting. And I think once you jump in, it's hard to get out. And I also think that it's probably a really poor form of organization, except for when it's not, except for in these decentralized spaces where there is no authority to kind of tell people what to do. Charles, can I say something about Kotaru?
It's cool. I was gonna, sure, I'll stay. I was gonna grab my phone where I took pictures of some of the slides from tonight, but
yeah.
wait.
So that's so we've been ideating around the idea of Kotaru, which is the court of the internet, and that's something that actually is very, very difficult to do. It's hard to do a court of the internet because there is no authority anywhere on the internet, and so that's why we just have these like lynch mobs, and there's no authority in terms of scholarship, and when an incident happens, it's just a lot of blah blah. So this kind of instance, when there is no then there is no natural authority, or the people involved or the groups involved are hostile to each other, or not necessarily natural allies, is a perfect situation, I think, for DAO. If it's a local community, it's generally not the ideal kind of organization, because it's not actually that satisfying in terms of human relationships. But it does have that, if you're kind of doing this kind of organizing, it allows for new types of organizing to occur, which couldn't really happen before. So that's where it's really exciting. And so there's a lot happening, and it's moving really fast. And
is that because there is a trust issue? If you meet with people from the internet, you don't know them personally, then of course there's also always the issue of, can I trust them? Will they actually do what they promised? And then you have this notion of smart contracts, which would actually be beneficial to you if you do what you said you would do, but which will punish you if you don't. And so your reputation would go up, for instance, if you do as promised, and it will go down if you don't. Is that more or less one of the elements?
I think one of the things that they're trying to do in DAOs is to make it obvious who has the power, and that power is represented by rep, and you can see who has the most rep, which gives them the most voting power. So because in some organizations, you have to actually really know the people to know who has the power. Like, the person nominally in charge is not the actual person with the social power. And it does happen in DAOs too, that people meet off chain, and then they form voting blocks, but it's also new. So you don't actually really know what's going to happen, or how people are going to game the system, or what's going on. So there's this just exciting, dramatic element to it that you don't find in like a nonprofit.
If I could add a little bit to the kind of general ideas around a DAO, as Lauren had mentioned, there's this reputation concept. There's also a concept of a kind of a shared independent wallet for cryptocurrency that can be distributed appropriately, where appropriately is how the people with rep vote on particular distributions. Is through, and the mechanism that happens is through proposals, which I suppose you guys have looked into a little bit. So anybody can put up a proposal, and then the group, based on their reputation, has a certain percentage of voting power. Proposals that pass may say something like, let's run the DAO like this, or they may say something, often call that a signaling proposal, or they may say, give me money so that I can do this, or let's give money to this group or whatever. And then based on whether or not it passes or not, the smart contract can be executed to distribute that money and that reputation appropriately. And that's something that you don't see in a generic, human-run collective when you have a lack of trust, or just people who are unscrupulous or greedy or selfish, or all those fun things that humans show, those fun behaviors. And so there's this kind of governance aspect, overarching governance aspect that a DAO can play, that kind of governance janitor that takes the human piece out of the things that can be automated. There's still a huge human component to all this, but and so from that point of view, the DAO is a machine that executes according to particular rules, but the humans are still required to do things like propose, put in these proposals, and to vote, and to play all their political games as well around the edges of a DAO. So a DAO by itself cannot be some kind of master arbiter of everything. There still is this huge human social component to it. So it's kind of a hybridization. But the beauty, in my opinion, is both the voting aspect, reputation aspect, and the wallet aspect can get pushed into the heart of the machine, so that people they can propose to put their fingers into the pie, but they can't just go and put their fingers into the pie automatically.
I have a quick question, which is sort of one of my takeaways. I wasn't able to kind of hang and do the networking thing so much at the end of this meetup that I just came from. But one of the things, so there's this term trustless, and it's sort of counterintuitive. And basically, there's total transparency. Everything's on the blockchain. And so there's no need for trust, if I understand. I see Stefan's doing some chat about this. So that's kind of one part of the question. And then, I guess, strictly speaking, as I was told sort of clearly just earlier tonight, we're talking about blockchain. This is a blockchain-based organization, and that's an important aspect. I had the understanding, kind of vaguely, that technically a DAO could be built off-chain, but I don't know if that's really important. But anyway, back to this idea of trust or trustlessness. What's up with that?
Yeah, I was wondering about how, because there is this human component, people have to vote. There's also the human component because humans will make the machine, will determine the rules, for instance, which the machine will use to determine the reputations.
So, hey, can I jump in? Because I guess technically I'm a computer scientist, and I would just say, although everyone is talking about the human component, there's nothing essential about a DAO that says, oh, there has to be this human component. Humans vote, humans politic. That may be how it is right now, but the definition of it is a distributed autonomous organization. There's nothing in that definition that says humans have to do anything. You could have artificial computer agents, at least in principle, creating policies, deciding how to spend money, voting, doing, I think, all the things you guys said humans would be doing in here. So, or you could have a mix of humans and agents. So I think it's worth kind of separating the descriptive ideas of what a DAO is now contemporaneously from the more theoretical side of it, which is not humans are not required. That's important. I'm not saying that that's good either. I'm not saying it's better to not have humans. I'm just saying.
But still, you do need humans to propose stuff, no?
Not at the again. This is contemporary, but you could have a DAO which was completely run by AI bots. I'm just saying this is in principle. Maybe in 50 years. I'm just saying that no, humans are not required for anything. The bots could write all the code. The bots could make all the votes. The bots could do everything on this blockchain. Now, is that good? Will it ever happen? Is it just in principle? I have no idea. I just wanted to point out that distributed autonomous organization doesn't anywhere in the definition say humans are required.
That would be a really fun, just sort of toy experiment, just to make one like that and sort of kick it around.
I mean, I think this already happens in any situation where you have autopilot. You know, an airplane is landing on autopilot. That it's a sequence of decisions that are being made on a machine level. So I don't think it's a big stretch to extrapolate that to, you know, a machine of a bigger level considered like an organization, like a utility. I could see this like being very much like an electric utility running as a DAO, where the machine makes a lot of the decisions about how to distribute energy and how to move it around.
So there would be a clear value application of peeragogy in there, I would suggest.
How's that?
I don't know. Robots learning from each other, basically.
Yeah, so that's right. So I mean, the other thing to say is, if we want to make this concrete for people in terms of the human experience and what would this be like, and you know, is this all just science fiction? No. If we look at something like Stack Exchange, it's almost the same as a DAO in some regards. You've got a bunch of agents, in this case they're humans, contributing to a shared resource which happens to not be distributed. It's owned by one specific company on the normal web. But as a step, you could have something like Stack Exchange that's run on the blockchain that's owned by this distributed autonomous organization rather than stackexchange.com. There would be exactly the same interaction from the human side. You'd see a web page, you'd upvote and downvote questions. Those could be measured in rep, this kind of stuff. But the storage would be offline, and maybe some of the rules and regulations of how to manage this website could be handled through voting by people. So you could see a kind of step-by-step transition from today's centralized platforms to ones that are more centralized, to ones that have indeed computational agents interacting and learning from each other. So the later phases of that stepping stone path are perhaps quite remote, but the initial phases are maybe not. And back to what Lauren was saying about, you know, would we see the kinds of great Shangri-Las there? Well, maybe not, but would we see any benefits whatsoever, even of taking those steps? I think that's important to ask.
Could you elaborate on the decentralized aspect? Because I more or less understand the idea of having this machine determining reputations, making decisions, but that could still be a very centralized machine.
Yeah, so some of the issues here are that it is maybe a centralized machine, and just because it's on the blockchain doesn't make that, doesn't do away with that in a way. But you could have a system set up where one can make a new proposal, right? So that new proposal could then become implemented in code. So it's a little bit like a governance or a governmental system, a legislature, where, you know, the different legislators from different states or different EU countries can come together and they say, these are the rules we want up to apply across this whole federated conglomerate, whatever, at whatever level. So individuals can vote. So that's yeah, if you just think of it as federated, I guess that's a little similar to this distributed. That would be my understanding of that. But there are other people here who are actually doing it. Sorry, someone was talking about a blockchain for art, so we could maybe think about that as an example. I don't know. I'm not really much of an expert. I think I've said now everything I know about blockchains.
So in the context of say the example that you just suggested around the kind of decentralized Q&A site like Stack Exchange, I want to kind of maybe just explore what's the top line benefit. Is it economic in some sense, or like literally with that example, like what would be the benefit of starting a new Stack Exchange that's called like Block Exchange, that's a Q&A site, and it's totally blockchain operated. So what, other than the fact that it's running on this fancy technology, like what's the meaningful benefit to people that they care about?
Well, so again, yeah, someone's putting in the chat out this AI and art thing. I would love to answer that question too, but I think maybe we should table it until we've answered it about the art example. So let's hear about that one, because we've got an expert right here. What are the benefits for this art on the blockchain?
Well, the idea between open money and open mutual credit is that the currency we use becomes sort of the reputation itself. Michael is the expert on open money, and so I always seek his guidance when dealing with the technicalities of open money. But it's an elegant solution to a lot of problems, as I see it. Community currencies solve a lot of the problems that currencies create. This monolithic solution of one blockchain to rule them all is going to fail miserably, I feel. And by having a lot of different community currencies, people will be better able to know the value of things in their own environments. Michael, I wish you would to step in and patch up a lot of my hems and haws. He may have stepped away though. Can you ask me some more specific questions about how?
You said you were using it for art, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, the idea is we will use the open money to evaluate and reward our members for their contributions to the community. We'll also try to use the currency for transactions dealing with the art we produce. I feel like building these systems from the grassroots is a better way to approach the problem, and building from a specific example. Like on Dig Life, we have a lot of we've got a lot of software in place that handles much of the governance and the infrastructure around implementing a community currency, but we just haven't got to the point of tying in our own token yet. Yeah, the Digital Life Collective.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, this example you gave about the tokens in the art community, are those tokens convertible in fiat money, dollars or euros or whatever?
They would be convertible to some cryptocurrency. The pilot project that we're building, we're using Keybase, so we would have the ability for our community tokens to be cashed out into XLM or lumens.
And those in turn could be converted into
Yes.
dollars.
Those could be converted into fiat because they're widely traded and
Yes. So, but where does the initial value store in the wallet come from? Is this on the basis of contributions by all the members pooling their resources? Because you can't create it from out of the thin air, or can you?
we can create our currency out of the thin air, and the value will come from the contributions or the promise. As I understand open money, the members will have the ability to generate their own tokens. There will be interchangeability among the tokens.
I think I would like to jump in just a kind of again, kind of taking an overview of this conversation and the context, also of Peeragogy project and group, team, organization, how you want to call it. As I understand, and I'm kind of a newcomer. I've known some of you for a number of years, but haven't really been directly involved until a couple months ago in these discussions, and sort of falling in the rabbit hole of actually being a contributor and sort of co-evolver of Peeragogy Handbook, and the sort of sensing into looking at the potential for, let's say, a more formalized organization of Peeragogy practitioners, community of practice, and so forth. And to be more specific, I understand, and I think, Joe, you've done some kind of collating, compiling to sort of the greatest flops, as you put it, of Peeragogy. And I guess some of them, or a lot of them, have to do with sort of attempts at making some business or going for grants and things like that. And so, but as I understand, there haven't really been any particular successes or continuity in going in this direction. And I think there's some members of the Peeragogy cohort at large over the years who have had a stronger interest relatively, but sort of there hasn't been coherence in this effort. And yeah, so I just thought I would kind of plug that in there to give some context.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Charlotte said she was going to have to leave in a couple of minutes, so I don't know if she wants to weigh in on that issue. I mean, basically, our monetizable thing is buying and selling that Peeragogy handbook. Well, mostly selling it, but not that many copies of it because we give away copies free. But that could be diversified. We were also looking at, for example, teaching a course through a formalized education thing. We've looked at MOOCs. But yeah, Charlotte, if you've got any other things you want to say about the business end, Charlotte is probably, as close or closer to the business end of this thing than anyone. So we should get her opinion on it.
Well, I don't know exactly how to make money on it. I mean, we sell an occasional book for $20. It's on Amazon. It requires, I mean, I like the idea of getting credits for, and I'm just so new to this whole blockchain. I like 90% of that goes over the top of my head, but getting credits for participating in making, at least paying for the production costs. And, you know, I run into this a lot with my other schemes, my concert series and a bunch of other stuff I do. You know, I try and do more than anyone else and then bring them along, help them see the value of it, hope that they see the value of it. Many of them do. And then, I don't know, maybe it's a personal failure of mine, but I find that people kind of tend to drop off, and I have to go, but I'm very impressed with this group, because this is like, I thought, you know, we would just get less and less people, but I tune in after 2 or 3 weeks and y'all are still here, more different people are here, and I guess I'm encouraged, but I'm also a little discouraged because just trying to do a book, and you know, I do other books. You know, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. But I have to head out and answer my door. So.
Okay, well, have fun, Charlotte. See you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, I think. So maybe we could revisit that other question about like what would be the benefit of having Stack Exchange on a blockchain, but maybe for people who have been on this project less long, or have only been on a couple of the calls, like let's zoom out, let's zoom a little bit further ahead to the, because you know, if we just look at like what's the immediate value of the next step, that would be one possible next step, but maybe it's not even the best value. But let's think a bit bigger towards something that's like really clearly valuable. So I think what would be really clearly valuable would be for, say, anyone in the world who has access to a computer or a smartphone to have access to really good, high quality education. I think that that's kind of inarguably valuable. And again, how close are we to that right now? Maybe anyone who has access to a smartphone can access things like YouTube, which is free. And they can access things like Udemy, which is not free, but you can pay maybe in principle not that much money for watching some videos and getting some course material. And you can get open educational resources and stuff like that. Or you could join calls like this, which are free if you know how to find them, and have interesting discussions with people online. So, you know, there's some nice things, but certainly this experience and none of the other ones I mentioned are like gonna result in a diploma for a graduate degree or a 2-year degree, and they're not necessarily, maybe in some cases they will result in job skills that you don't need a diploma, but you can demonstrate I have the skill to program, or I have the skill to set up and run a food distribution network, or I have the skill to, you know, devise a new cryptocurrency scheme or whatever. In some cases they will lead to those nice outcomes. So, you know, maybe those nice outcomes don't need that much more formality for those who have access, but what's missing is for those people who don't yet have access, or don't have very consistent access, to really get good alternatives. So I think that that's where the benefit lies, is in distributing the benefits of the knowledge economy and participation in the knowledge economy to people who don't have it, and for people who do have that benefit, you know, to make it even better for them too, to give them more opportunities. You know, what's the future of journalism? What's the future of academia? What's the future of the climate and electricity? You know, those are all issues that we're all in some ways concerned with, even if some are concerned with some more than others. So, you know, anyway, but scaling them up and scaling them out to the people who don't have access, I think, is the big thing. Now, could building a blockchain Stack Exchange directly help with that? Probably not, because you got the regular Stack Exchange, which happens to be controlled by a company, but it's all open source content. Could it help with it? I'll tell you my secret answer. Could it help with it in the case where we have this AI enhanced thing? Yeah, an AI enhanced version of Stack Exchange would be nice, because then rather than just asking and answering questions, you could have a bot that would give you some tutoring, or a bot that could at least make some recommendations to other people to talk to, or a bot that could help in some other way assembling the materials in some useful way. So is it essential again that should be on a blockchain? No, but the AI enhanced aspect would be quite fruitful, I think, in terms of helping with access. Because maybe there's a time, although there are a lot of people on this call, maybe there's a time when we're not available for questions and answers, or someone wants to drill on something that's easy to drill on and save their time with a tutor to something else. So I think that would be one benefit, but that's my own personal thing that I've been thinking a lot about that hasn't got a whole lot to do with blockchain. But it did occur to me in the discussion with Charles that that would be one possible place to put it. You could put this thing on the blockchain, and then uploading questions and answers could be done, uploading new bots and new strategies for writing them could be done. We could share that. The bots could ask and answer questions to each other. You could build a really great AI system. Maybe there's loads of benefits to that. Now, you know, this may just sound like science fiction and impossible, but I don't think it's impossible. The question is, how quick is it possible? But hopefully I've at least outlined the step between like the first step and then all the next steps leading up to the benefits a little bit more, how I see it.
I think to add to that really quickly with the Stack Exchange idea, maybe extending that slightly, if you could imagine that if on Stack Exchange there's some type of material that's sensitive that's being discussed, or something politically sensitive to which a group would want to destroy by taking over Stack Exchange because they are owned by a private company, and then maybe delete and erase the history of particular discussions and so forth. So putting something onto the blockchain, putting knowledge onto the blockchain would make it ridiculously difficult to erase the evidence of that learning, get rid of those courses, get rid of that knowledge. If a political entity or social entity wanted to destroy that information. So when I think about the blockchain, I think about its immutability. Once you've put something in there, it's in there forever, because it's a distributed system. You'd have to hunt down every single copy, which is held locally on potentially millions of computers. So therefore, it's basically kind of an immortal record of information. So whether it's holding somebody accountable because of that immortal record, or whether it's because it's protecting knowledge because of the immortal record, those are two really good reasons to consider using a blockchain versus just continuing with something like, for example, Stack Exchange, which is owned by a particular company that maybe somebody buys one day and then nukes all the databases because they want to monetize the data, or they want to use it in a different way, or they don't like that it said something mean about their president or whatever. So that's one way to think about it as well.
It's certainly possible, but you wouldn't even need, you wouldn't even need bad actors to have those kinds of problems. I mean, this happened in Alexandria, Egypt. Their library burned down. Now, is that probably going to happen? No, probably Stack Exchange replicates their servers all over the globe, and they're not going to all simultaneously burn down. But I don't think I think erasure or destruction of data, again, that's an extreme case, but you could have, let's take Wikipedia as an example. So would there be any benefit to having Wikipedia backed up on the blockchain? I mean, this is sounding a little bit more crazy. I'm not sure there would be benefits of having Wikipedia backed up, but I would definitely say that the horror story you described there is true. You know, you don't get the same Wikipedia in China that you get in Taiwan, for example. So, you know, this kind of stuff is not hypothetical in that case.
Then, of course, there is the classical counter of anti-pattern saying that immutability is not always something we really want. Suppose that you have a change in a Wikipedia article denying the Holocaust and or spreading all kinds of outrageous stuff. then it would be immutable. It would be there forever. You could not erase it, which would be going counter the right to be forgotten, which is something, at least in Europe, is something which is very popular, to claim the right to be forgotten.
I wonder, just, the thing that comes up for me is that we're really talking about like extreme edge cases, like things that, although we're talking about them like as if they're serious, they just don't really have relevance in our day-to-day life. The probability that Wikipedia is going to get taken over and everything's going to get taken offline, and yeah, that would be devastating to humanity. The chances that it's going to happen, I don't know. And I guess what I'm interested in talking about is the direct tangible benefits. It's like sometimes people will have this conversation about Android versus Apple phones, iOS. And I'll be like, oh, why do you prefer Android? They're like, well, it's an open system. And I'm like, oh, well, how does that affect you personally? Because I know this is a person that it has zero relevance for them, whether Android is more open or closed than iOS, because they're at a technological sophistication level where it just doesn't matter. So they're giving me like the PR answer. This is the PR answer, like Android is open source, iOS isn't. Okay, how does that affect your day-to-day life? It doesn't. So I'm curious about like the argument, because intuitively I very much resonate with this movement, but I think that on a practical level, to really get mainstream adoption, which is kind of what we're talking about with DAOs, like right now, the complexity and technological challenge you need to go through to get set up on a DAO is just not accessible for the vast majority of people. And to make that bridge, what's the practical value of, because we're talking about like a Peeragogy DAO, like what would be the value for us beyond just running on a fancy technological stack that we couldn't accomplish with a much simpler solution just using, PayPal?
Yeah.
The question is about incentives for co-learning. That's where this inquiry and this kind of journey started. That's just to remind. So there's a
I do.
there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a important question, but again, we could have an intermediate step between a DAO and something else. But yeah, I think this idea, let's turn to the peeragogy one, because that's like, many of us have a more physical sense of what that would mean somehow, or could mean. Doesn't necessarily involve AI or anything. So another thing I was just posting about in the Google group is like, what's the difference between a DAO and a co-op? So if I have a company incorporated in the UK, and I say, I'm going to designate this company to be a co-op, and anyone who wants to can buy a share, so your incentives will be that you're going to get a share of the profits of this co-op. We're going to build it all out as a co-op, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's much difference. The difference, I'll tell you what I think, is that a co-op is already an autonomous organization. That's part of the definition. So the difference is just this distributed aspect of things, and how much benefit do we get of something being distributed or not distributed? I'm not sure. So this kind of goes back to what Lauren was saying, is that at least you'd have a sense that the rules and regulations are clear. There's that. It would be good to have that, and not have some kind of hidden cabal or hidden power struggle. And co-ops have failed in some cases because of those kinds of things. But I do think, personally, I think that the benefits, if any, of this kind of stuff do come from the AI scenarios, which are probably 5, if not 20 years away. And so that the immediate benefits from a user perspective aren't there because they haven't been built yet for these DAOs. Now, if you wanted to build something that would build those things and derive those long-term benefits in the future, I think then we're talking. But those have to be done maybe by idealists and other people who want to take a long-term view on building things. So yeah, I would leave there on that.
But I still can get the idea of the DAO, even though I'm maybe critical about it. But still, I will also see the benefits. To make it very concrete, suppose that you have a very simple reading group, but it is distributed. There are people from all over the world. And then suppose that you say, well, after reading one book, you want to read another book, and you want to engage in a certain project. But maybe my project is not the same as Charles or Joe's project. So we have to introduce proposals. I make a proposal, others make a proposal. And then you would have, in that DAO construct, you would have some rules which would determine that it's not really one man or one woman, one vote, but that there is a kind of a, that it will check what your reputation is in order to make a better calculation, if you want. So that in this voting there would be a better, well, that it just would turn out to have a more, maybe more, I don't know whether it is honest or not, but it would take into account, for instance, reputation in order to arrive at a decision. And that could be valuable. It could also be valuable to have those tokens, so that people who contribute a lot, and then you have to determine what is a contribution and what is a good contribution. So if you have people contributing a lot, they would get more tokens or more reputation. I can more or less see the benefits of that system, and it all depends on how much effort does it take to develop it, and would it really help for a co-learning group, for instance, to attract more members, to have more consistent contributions by members or not.
That's the basic idea. I mean, that's my motivation, which I don't know if it's catching on or if that's going to make sense, but that's like my hypothesis, let's say.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I was definitely feeling the Lorenz and the when you were talking about, is it really worth it? I think for casual use, it's at this point right now, the UX is so bad that it's pretty terrible for any kind of casual use. It's just a nightmare to onboard people just across the board to any blockchain application at all. It's not. Regular people just don't like it. And so it will probably get easier down the line. But so again, I think cooperatives do fill a role, definitely, especially when people are cooperating and they're kind of in one place. And it would be, for me, it's I really wish the DAO people and the co-op people could work together to figure out, because you could probably have really amazing hybrids when, the co-op and DAO people work together, and when the token and open money people work together, and we actually come up with smarter solutions. Because we could probably come up with much more sophisticated, cool stuff if there was like a co-op DAO thing, because they don't really do the same things. So DAO again is really kind of better when the parties not just don't trust each other, when they're kind of adversarial. Like, say for example, if there were 5 nonprofits or something trying to distribute funds in an African country or something, when you have like a high chance of corruption or collusion or something like that, then it's very, very good to have a DAO. So just thought I'd say that.
There was so there were 2 talks tonight here in Zurich. One was this guy Adrian, which some of you know or seen around in the DAO Stack community and other DAO spaces. There's a guy, Paul, actually I have this card somewhere, but it's not here. Anyway, and he is kind of a business person, now very involved in sort of med tech and the pharmaceutical industry, sort of innovating pharma, let's say. And so he's actually making a DAO to run clinical trials for patients that have multiple sclerosis, and they're looking specifically at omega-3 fish oil, and so it's like a very, very specific thing that they're setting up. And so it has, the DAO has to do with patient data, essentially, and the whole kind of system around that, and running these trials. Why I'm bringing this up is because he has also set up nonprofit association. Now here in Switzerland, there are these things called Verein, which is roughly association. It's the most sort of easy, common type of nonprofit. I guess it is considered a company, actually, but it's membership based, and so. But I guess, you know, the point is there can be different kinds of corporate structures and DAOs, kind of hybrids or different, you know, mechanisms. The DAO can sort of just deal with the data, for example, and it could still be sort of run by a company, or there's all kinds of stuff going on as we speak. So just to kind of expand the view here.
Hey guys, I'm gonna jump off. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenz.
Bye.
Thanks, Lawrence. Okay, I think we still have about 10 minutes, at least.
So I feel like maybe we should allow those who didn't have much chance to say anything, if they had any thoughts, to say what they want. Stefan is saying something in the chat, which might not be relevant to any. Sorry, these things disappear when I'm on this smartphone. Not so smart. But are there anyone who didn't get to say a lot, who wants to say something?
I don't mind.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I don't mind jumping in really quick. I know I'm new to DAO, and I've been out for a few months, so I feel a little naive on understanding what's going on. But what I've seen is that DAO seems to be very much a ledger as a common theme that everyone is talking about. So one of the things that I put into my notes is a thing called Trinity Model of Management, which came from early work in a book called Ripples of Zambezi by Ernesto Cerulli. And it works a lot on grassroots community entrepreneurship building and engagement. And I know when there was a mention of Peeragogy as a product and the challenge of engagement, or that kind of marketing engagement piece, and then also DAO as potentially being a fiscal ledger, it just made me think about how when we're working together facilitating community impact, if DAO and Peeragogy were coming together, how might they look in a Trinity model of management with product, market, fiscal? So just as a framing of how it might appear and who might be. I know one of the things that I also heard, I think it was you, Joseph, that said something to the heart of everyone should have access to this and everyone should have access to learning. And that made me think of a challenge in platform design, where if you try to get everyone onto your platform, then it's really challenging to get that engagement piece. And so my thought was, who might be the common user to start with? And would it be a facilitator looking for something like DAO to be able to help them to facilitate and know in a community who they might need to? I'm not sure exactly how that would go, but would a facilitator be a primary user in a community, or how that might look? But that's all I have to offer, sorry.
Thank you. That's a lot to offer. Thanks. I appreciate that. We'll have to have a look at that reference. I was thinking when you were talking, like, one way to use it rather than at the international scale, even MOOCs can be quite big, or even classes at universities can be quite big. There was someone who came up here and asked me, why is my calculus class not working? And I was like, well, tell me a little bit more about it. She was like, well, there's 2,000 people in the class, ... And I'm like, okay, well, that's probably the problem right there. You know, so some places are so big that you already have a pretty big population. You wouldn't be managing governance so much, but you might be managing things like organizational structure, peer-to-peer conversations, maybe even different levels of facilitators. So you could have each group of 10 within this 2,000 could have a mentor or something guiding them, and how do you coordinate things? Now, is it better as a DAO as opposed to some other technology? I have no idea. But some MOOCs are even huger than that. Some MOOCs have millions of people in them. So why not have a distributed architecture? But I think we need the experts on DAOs to weigh in about that kind of stuff.
Well, what's still lacking in this idea of splitting the group up and then having a facilitator for less people is the incentive issue Charles is talking about, and there of course tokens could be. It's almost an element of gamification that people would have the incentive of accumulating tokens and reputation points or whatever. In exchange for their contributions. And that would be something new for the pedagogy group, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, and we hear so much about, like on Wikipedia, what doesn't happen, you know, the gender imbalance or bad actors and people trolling. But every time we see these kinds of anti-patterns, maybe we could think about what would encourage the more useful and beneficial kinds of interactions, and maybe the incentives for those encourageable actions are not so obvious. So maybe maybe it's not that Wikipedia needs to go on the blockchain, but just sort of a reputation model for keeping track of people who do beneficial actions on Wikipedia could go on.
It's far from self-evident because it could backfire easily. Suppose that you would say, well, you can earn so many tokens for every text entry you make at a forum, or for every annotation you make in the pedagogy handbook. Then you could have people who consciously or unconsciously start gaming the system and start producing lots of annotations, even without much consideration of the quality of the annotations, just to accumulate the tokens. You see, you could have a kind of inflation of annotations caused by your incentive system.
I think there would have to be a refinement of sort of, you know, evaluating the value, you know, of the you know, like that.
But the evaluation, it seems to be something which should be done by a human. It's pretty easy. For instance, you have this very interesting reputation model of the DAO stack, I believe, or which one was it, saying that your reputation increases if you vote and for something, and that afterwards it appears that the community agrees that the majority of people is voting the same way as you do, then your reputation goes up. I think that's a bit of a problematic kind of rule, but it is a rule, of course, which you can have a mechanic rule. There you can program such a thing easily. You just have to see, well, what was the outcome of the vote? What did the person do? Okay, he was aligned with the group, so reputation increases. You can have another game there, because people could say, well, I don't care about the proposal. I just have to to make a prediction about what the group will do. In order to align yourself with the group without any consideration whether you intrinsically agree with the proposal or not. So you can very easily have very negative consequences or results.
Yeah, so here's a thought though, Roland, which is this is I think a quite nice one, getting back to some of those more ecological concerns, which is what's interesting is not just building a given set of rules and saying, hey, we're going to go with this set of rules, but building a quite mutable set of rules which allow people to change them. So if then people say, okay, you know, I've come up with a different way to do it. Like I can think of an easy one in the case of the evaluating people's contributions. So yeah, that has to be done by a human, but how do you give an incentive for that? So you build a new rule that will somehow help give incentive for evaluating other people, and so on and so forth. So you keep adding new rules and maybe changing or deprecating the old ones. Maybe not changing, but you just pull them offline and you say, okay, we don't use these rules anymore. We use these other new ones. To me, that seems quite beneficial if that's kind of the main the main purpose is to come up with better better policies over time.
I wanted to mention something that we talked about, I guess it was last week, or, that it's come up a few times, and Howard Rheingold even sort of showed up and chimed in with referencing some research. And I think, Joe, you had heard about another sort of bit of evidence that were relating to financial incentives for learning and how it has a detrimental effect. And I haven't sort of studied those two examples enough, nor have I seen sort of necessarily a pattern of that, but maybe it's well enough established. But I think that's an interesting question that I think will the further we go in this direction, I think that's going to be really important to examine carefully.
Maybe Gary could tell us about how contributions are being get the people who contribute get tokens in the arts group. What kind of mechanism is being used there? Because I really think that the devil is in the detail in these systems.
Yeah, we're going to make extensive use of bots and smart contracts in issuing tokens. We want it to be automatic. If a person attends a Zoom session they will automatically get tokens for the Zoom session. Say the person who records the Zoom session will get community tokens for recording and uploading, and anyone who edits it will receive tokens for that. And ultimately, the art object will be sold through smart contracts, and realize we're in the very early stages of this, but the sale of each art contract will be the proceeds from the sale of the art object will be distributed to the contributors of to that art object in a proportionate fashion, and it will all be spelled out in the smart contract. The payments will be automatic. Let's see. Could you ask me some more questions?
Yes, I was wondering, is there any form of quality control? So suppose I do contribute to the artwork which will be sold, and so I'm entitled to get a proportional proportional reward of so many tokens, but maybe I did a particularly lousy job. Isn't it very hard for such an automatic system to be the judge on whether my contribution was beneficial or negative?
Well, I say that these rewards for the contributions are going to be automatic, but the members will create claims, and the claims will be what the community looks at to determine whether or not the contribution was valid or not. And my understanding of this comes from Michael Linton's theory of open money. And I'll be honest, it's taken me 2 years of knowing Michael and hearing him talk about this idea of open money to even get to the point where I feel like that's the direction I want to go. but I'm a bot builder. You know, I build bots. I see, you know, the elegance of what he's saying, and I see how easy it would be for a bot to come up with a system. Yeah, we are worried about people hacking the system and abusing the system, but that thread of hacking actually creates, you know, the incentive for the community to democratically express its belief about the claims that the member makes.
So it's a hybrid system. It's a hybrid system, actually. There's part of it is a bot, and part of it is still the community expressing itself.
Yes, and the community expressing itself can become automatic as well.
How so?
Say again?
And how can that become automatic, the expression of the community?
Well, to me, automatic would be as simple as a check mark on a claim in a chat room. You know,
Okay.
six check marks and the claim is honored.
Yeah.
To me,
Okay.
that's automatic. But yes, it is a hybrid. But I'm not sure that there is a pure system that's not going to run into serious problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to point out that many people are saying, I've got to go, but for anyone who's still left, if you want to continue the conversation, we're on keybase.io, and I think you would have to either find the Peeragogy group or get in touch with Charles, who's got a cool handle who I can't pronounce, Love Evolve.
That's correct.
Oh yeah, Charles, yeah. I know Love Evolve over there.
So yeah, so it would be great to continue with you, Gary, because you have lots of nice things and interesting things to say about this. If you jump into the Peeragogy chat, we could continue there, but that goes for everybody here. This is quite a popular session. The last time I think we had 4 people, now we had like 12. So, you know, quite a lot of interest in this topic.
Well, I'm excited to learn about the Peeragogy group on Keybase, and I will join as soon as possible, and I want to know more.
I can just add you, Gary, no problem.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, this is, yeah, you know, I think, I wish, oh, go ahead, Joe. I had something, but yeah, it's fine.
No, I forbid the word and. Go for it.
I wish that Stefan could speak with us with his voice, but so because one of the things that it was sort of flying by in the last week or whenever, I think it's very interesting to think about data, and one of the the event that I was just at, and this one of the talks I just mentioned before about patient data for these clinical trials, for example. But actually, the host of the event was a software company that one of the and I just barely connected with the guy, but I'll follow up. They're working among other things on some decentralized data systems and kind of the notion of custodianship of data. Came up and so yeah, and I'm really not the tech guy, but I think it's fascinating in the context of pedagogy or just in DAOs in general, and just to kind of come to some point here, like with this guy who was giving the talk and is designing the system for the clinical trials. It's still this nonprofit organization that I mentioned before that will actually, literally house the data, whether they put it in the cloud, and he's talking about, putting it in the Amazon cloud. But still, there's sort of like one person or whoever who has the key to decrypt. There's the anonymization of the data, and then there's the, actual holding of it, and that opens up a lot of questions when you come to sort of, you know, really trying to decentralize. If you're decentralizing data custodianship, then you know, it's interesting. Put it like that.
Another thought that just occurred to me, getting back to the reading group thing. So we could already look at what the advantages participating in this kind of thing has for us personally, that brought us here tonight, and as it brought many of us in the past to similar discussions, versus or in addition to having a day job, having other friends, having other kinds of discussions we do. So it's not that it's instead, it's just that, you know, it's something that we enjoy doing for whatever reason. So some of those incentives that we already feel are good, they're clearly good for us, and maybe we need to understand, you know, how that would broaden out for other people. But I have one other thought about the reading group, which is, I guess since we didn't really discuss the readings today, I suppose that for anyone who wants to discuss them, there's a chance to catch up for next week.
Yes, of course.
Roland, or even Joe or anyone, you did make a mention in your email of certain chapters that relating to technology that had some relevance to DAOs. I don't know if you want to maybe just touch on that for a moment, just as a reference.
Well, the relevance is limited in this sense that the chapter is about platforms and technologies. And so, for instance, it starts out in a pretty more abstract way or theoretical, scholarly fashion. But then it goes on with very concrete discussions of tools such as forums and wikis. And in my opinion, what we could add there is governance tools, and I think that DAO would be one of the candidates of possible governance for peer-to-peer projects and productions. So it's more like that's the place in the handbook where we could add a section about the DAO.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I've been making some notes and thinking what to bring in there. There's a lot.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm getting sleepy, but I will look forward to next week. I also feel like I will pre-announce that on the 17th, which I guess that's not next Tuesday, is it? Might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will attempt to at that point publicize a course outline. This is a preview of my course outline. But I will describe it as, I'm thinking it'd be nice to have a course that basically redoes what we did in the reading group, but do it as a course. So it'll be a bit more intensive and take a little bit longer, maybe. But anyway, I will announce that on the Google group, and I'll describe. Hopefully, I have a chance to describe it next week in person as well. But it's a preview of a course that we would. Sorry.
Will that be a mathematics course?
No. It would follow what we've done in the reading group almost exactly, but do it as a course rather than a reading group. So the level of participation will be more. But basically, it follows what we've done in the reading group all over again. So for anyone who's gone through it, it would still have some extra benefit. For someone who hadn't gone through it, you could also jump in.
Yeah.
So, but I'll share more next time.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I think I will stop recording by now, if that's okay. I'm stopping the recording, and